Want
Did
middle?
you guys do whites too?
Makes no difference.
Makes no difference to me
I
either.
don't care.
Politically, you'd be in the middle, wouldn't you, Roz?
No,
Not necessarily.
not necessarily.
Right.
Dave was just,
I might sit all the way.
welcome to a public conversation. My name is McCarthy Coyle, and I'm glad to be back on the air. I can't stand to be off too long. We've got a primary election the day after tomorrow. You're watching this program on Sunday, and we tape this program live, non-edited, on Thursday, just this past Thursday afternoon. And this is our first year. I'm sorry. I want to first introduce briefly our guests, and then we'll start into our conversation. So on my far right is Carolyn Overman, and then we have Rosalind Chatoff, and to my left is Dave Harmon. And we'll tell you more about those folks, and those folks will speak for themselves as well. This is our first. This is our first election under the new non-partisan system that the citizens of the city of Missoula chose in an election, back last June, was that? When we decided to go for non-partisan elections. And we also decided to establish neighborhood councils. And so those are things that have been moving through city council, the neighborhood council concept. How are we going to affect it? And there's been quite a bit of controversy. That might not be the best word, but who is the new party and what are they doing? The Democrats and the Republicans and so forth and so on. So with that, I'm just going to start. Carolyn Overman, with you, and first tell folks that I was very impressed since I've never dove into the sky. Carolyn Overman has been a skydiver and outdoors woman. She owns and operates Western Montana Lighting. She's in business. She's been a librarian, I believe, and loves to read. Mostly fiction, and Carolyn, I have never wanted to be on the city council because it seemed like a terribly hard job and very time-consuming. Why do you want to be there?
Well, I'm always up for a challenge. This looked like a good challenge. I'm very committed to Missoula. I feel very strongly about continuing my commitment. It's been in lots of other different ways, but I feel real strongly about continuing it, and I thought that this would be a good chance to do that. Our business was finally at a situation, because we have great people there, that I could turn some of that over to some other people, and I just wanted to try it out, see if I can be of any help and some assistance in running our city.
Is this your first run for elective office?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
I have never really been very politically involved on any particular level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And okay, say you got through the primary and the general, and then all of a sudden you're on the city council. Like, what's troubling you the most? If you had to pick out one or two things about city government, or how things are run, how things are done, laws that you don't like, laws that we don't have that you would like to see passed. Could you give us one or two examples of something that you'd like to work on?
That I'd like to work on. I would like to work on, in particular, our basic services, making sure that what the city was originated to do continues to do that. And that may, when I talk about basic services, I'm talking about sewer, law enforcement, fire protection, streets, that type of thing. So that's going to be my main focus there. What happens that I don't like? I think we're getting a little bit too into specific management, and we have some great people on the staff that I think that we should rely on a little bit more, and maybe that the city council needs to set more policy as opposed to specifics.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are a couple of the things. How much more do you want to, is there anything, laws themselves? No, I don't have any specific laws that I would like to see enacted or repealed. No, I don't have anything particular there.
All right. One thing that keeps coming up is growth management, right? We live in a community where it's obviously I got a car for the first time like about 2 years ago after 15 years of walking around Missoula, and I drove out to Reserve Street, for the very first time, and I said, what happened? I had literally never seen it, and it was like it was a shock. So so the growth management issue comes up as like how do you preserve the hometown qualities, the charm, and things like this, and still allow things to grow and jobs to happen, things like that.
Well, as you probably know, because you have been involved, this is not an easy task. They've been working on this for over 3 years. As long as we talk about growth management, that's great. We don't want to talk about growth control, which by that I mean let's not look at stopping growth. Let's look at the ways that we can still continue to grow and be the kind of Missoula that we are right now without, saying no to everything, but we still do definitely need to look at, like you said, keeping the charm of Missoula, because no matter where you go in Montana, Missoula has its own charm. It's quite different than the rest of them. So this is not an easy task, and I'm not saying that I have any particular solutions to anything, but I think I have a good way to use common sense and look at what we do have and work from there.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about growth management, we most specifically must be very, very cognizant of what it does to the affordability of living in Missoula. And I'm not just talking about rents or homes, but everything in general. So there's a lot of balancing that has to take place,
Mm-hmm.
and not just let's only look at where the lines are, but we need to look at a good balance of how we make sure that our young people, our retired people, can still afford to live here.
Okay. What about the middle-aged ones? All right.
We're a little bit easier to deal with us, I think.
Rosalind.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't you take a shot? Let's say the fates go your way and you're on city council come January. What is it that you don't like about what's going on now, and what are the things that you'd want to accomplish?
With the city or with city council?
Well,
Or both?
Both. Sure.
Okay, well, with city council, one of the things that is happening right now is that city council has committees. And as city council people, you have to belong to at least 2 committees. Well, you can join all the committees. Well, the purpose of a committee is so that you can microscopically involve yourself in issues and to learn more, so that the entire city council doesn't have to do the research. They bring it to the city council. What's happening is many more people, almost the entire city council, are on every committee. Well, it's like everything is decided by the whole council to begin with, and it's taking too much time. I think that we need to have a limit on to how many committees you can join, because I don't think that people are really doing justice to anyone specifically, or there are people who don't have the time to join every committee, because city council is not supposed to be a full-time job. And although it winds up being a full-time job, it's not supposed to be. And I think that we should let the committees do that and act as a committee and then bring it to city council. Instead, it's being decisions by the whole council, and that's one of the things that I see that's wrong. Also, the micromanagement of the city of Missoula. It's gotten down now to the color of paint and down to inches, and it's like we can only legislate just so much. we have to legislate what's healthy, we have to legislate what's safe. But there's a limit to, if I want to paint my fence a dark shade of grape, that unless it's really offensive to my neighbors, I should be allowed to do certain things. So as far as city council is concerned, I think that they should not be as divided as they've been either.
Why did I get the impression that when we changed the nature of the city government, when we voted back in June, for some reason I have this impression that that was going to clear the way to allow us, to turn over more of these functionary things, important but functionary things, so that the city staff, were the ones that came in and there wasn't, yet the micromanagement that you referred to. So that if staff came in and presented a report or a plan or what have you, that I'm not saying this was in the law that we voted, but somehow I got this implication that there was going to be some kind of a sea change, and that there would be more of this nitty-gritty stuff that was, not political in nature, lighting systems and things like that. I thought that was going to...
It's a matter of delegating responsibility and allowing people to do their job, You have to delegate responsibility. And it seems to me now that the city council wants to be in control of everything. And they are, in the end, they do get the vote and they do get the choice. But it's gotten to the point where they're into too much, that's taking too much time. Some of it is, I see as unnecessary. I see, that they should move on to other things, that they're getting bogged down in one issue, and it never ends. It's down to literally inches. Well, should be 45 feet. Well, they're asking for 50 feet, and then it takes an hour to discuss the 5 feet, or even 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference, and that just is taking up too much time and too much money. As to your thoughts about whether or not this new regime of having nonpartisan, it really hasn't been nonpartisan. We are the first truly nonpartisan candidates. We're sitting right here. And it's something that is new. Everybody is still stuck on their old system of being, what are you? I mean, I get asked it all the time. I'm sure that you get asked it all the time too. What are you?
Mm-hmm.
And if I say I'm truly nonpartisan, that I'm here to represent the constituency and the people, then I'm looked at, well, where do you stand on, which is a good question, but I always say that, and I do want to say that there are approximately somewhere between 5,500 and 6,000 voters in the Rattlesnake that are registered in Ward 1, and I am one person of all that number. So my opinion does count, but I am one of a constituency. And so the Rattlesnake and the downtown and the area that is included in Ward 1 has a certain set of things that go along with it that make it that ward and that are concerned, of that ward, but I'm only one person.
And Dave, you're getting your shot in about 10 seconds. I just want to tell everybody that you're watching this on Missoula Community Access Television, noted around the country as being one of the finest facilities of its kind in the country. And I just wanted to say that, and thanks everybody and volunteer crew who's helping out on the show. Dave Harmon, you're an outfitter, and you raise llamas, and you have a family, and you're 36. You're originally from Maine, the big forested state, and you have your degrees from the University of Montana. And is this your first run for political office?
It is. Yep.
And you're, of the 3 candidates here, you're associated with the new party anyway, right?
That's right.
Exactly. So why do you want to be on city council?
Well, there's a bunch of things, I think for a lot of people when they look at Missoula, on first glance there's a lot of neat things about it. our hip coffee shops and the mountains and the rivers, and it definitely is a beautiful place, and it's a great place to live still. But when you start looking in under all of the that stuff on top, I think we've got some pretty serious problems in Missoula. And I don't want to be kind of a pessimistic kind of guy, but I think there's some things going on that people really need to know about. For example, 1 out of 5 children in Missoula County are raised in poverty. That's 20% of the kids in my county are raised in poverty. I think we're growing, sprawling too fast. We're getting too big too fast, and we're starting to lose the character that makes Missoula Missoula. Probably at one time, Missoula was one big neighborhood, and people would know each other and wave and talk to each other. Well, as we've grown, when we were growing slowly, we grew little neighborhoods. We had the McCormick neighborhood and the Lower Rattlesnake, and little neighborhoods would sprout up. But now, as we've been growing faster at this 2% growth rate, we haven't been thinking about growing in neighborhoods. And I'm really concerned about that. I've got 2 young boys. I want to be able to grow up here, get a job here, be able to afford a home, and the way things are going, that's not going to happen. There's the difference between what people earn here. We've got very low wages compared to what it costs to live here. The average cost of housing in 1996 was like $115,000 of all houses sold. You need to earn $40,000 a year in order to be able to afford a home like that. There's a whole lot of people I know anyways that don't earn $40,000 in this town. So I'm really concerned about growth and about the difference between what people earn and what it costs to live here. Those things, in a nutshell, those things I'm concerned about. I've got some answers, I think, things I think we should head towards, and I'd be glad to expound on those now.
Well, you got a little time coming your way.
Okay.
What's the top of your list? I mean,
Well, let's talk about growth management maybe first. One thing I didn't realize until recently is that taxpayers, you and me and Rosalind and Carolyn and everybody here, is subsidizing sprawl in this town, and I think that needs to stop. And
how do you mean that, subsidizing?
Yeah, what's happening is Bozeman State did a study, and they found out that for new development in the state of Montana, for every dollar we bring in tax revenue, it costs us approximately $1.40 to provide services to that, the basic services Carolyn was talking about: police, fire, sewer, and road maintenance. Okay, so for every dollar we bring in, it costs us $1.40. Well, who pays for that? You and me and all the taxpayers pay for that, and I think that needs to stop. So one thing I would be in favor of is imposing impact fees on developers so that they pay that cost instead of the taxpayers. There's no reason why we have to subsidize something that maybe the most of us don't like in the first place. I'd also be in support of the 10 growth management tools that the Growth Management Task Force has been working on. They've come up with 10 different ways, and don't ask me them all because I can't recite them all to you. But impact fees is one, having delineating the urban service area is another, and I think those are good things we need to do. We need to get those put into effect.
Let me go back to Carolyn here for a second on this growth management thing. Now, you've got a business. I have the feeling, not with you in particular, that growth management scares people who are entrepreneurs because they think it has to do with, they're not being able to grow their business or whatever. I don't know if you had any. That's just a naive question on my part.
Yeah, I guess I've never seen it that way. Because I don't think it has anything to do with really actually growing our businesses. Actually, I've been more concerned about it in regards to what it does to the end consumer and what those costs are to the end consumer. Because with the impact fees, and they can be very useful in a number of different ways, but we have to be very careful with them. And I don't have the studies with me right now, so I can't quote you some of the things, but what that does to the end consumer, for every $1,000 that we raise the cost of a home, we get rid of 10,000 people who can afford that. So we have to be very careful about there again, we're talking about a balance. So we do have the, we can use impact fees, but we have to be cautious what happens to that end consumer and make sure that that doesn't eliminate the very people that we're talking about we want to move into this or be able to move up in our community.
Thoughts? Any thoughts on your?
Well, I had a thought about this designated urban service area. I have been, first of all, I would like to say that growth management is not a new concept. It is something that this group does not have the market cornered on growth management. It has been in place. I have lived here for 17 years, and the reason I came here years ago was because it was a neighborhood, because I felt safe, I felt comfortable, and I did not try to make it into an urban area. I myself never tried to make it into California or New York City or Boulder, Colorado, all of which places where I have lived at one time. And that was never my intent. A lot of people come here, they buy a piece of property, they subdivide, and I ask them, well, why do you love it here? Well, I love it here because it's not crowded, because there's very little pollution, there's little traffic. I said, well, if you're going to build on this piece and you're going to subdivide it and put 6 more houses on it, there you have more traffic, more cars, more pollution, more noise pollution, and you're creating what you just left. So you have to figure out, my idea is, we have to decide, and it's not only up to me, there's a constituency here that it depends on. We have to make, I learned very early in life, you make the deal up front. You do it in a marriage, you do it in friendships, you do it in business relationships, you make the deal up front. You make a good contract, you make an agreement that you can live with, and then you follow through. You don't say 5 years down the line, oh, I don't like that, You have to realize that whatever we do, there's always going to be consequences. Nothing, you change one thing, everything changes, not just one thing. So growth management is something that is, I think one of the things that we must do is grow a little slower. You can't stop an 8-year-old and say, hey, you're cute at 8 and I love you this way, and I want you to stay this way so that I can pat you on the head. But that kid is going to grow up and be a teenager and eventually be an adult, and you're going to have to love it that way too. And we have to look at the city like that also. The thing is, it has grown enormously fast in a very short period of time, and that even children get growing pains. The city gets growing pains. This is what's happening right now. I'm looking for a slowdown. Zero population growth, zero growth is not realistic. We're not going to, that's not even healthy. It really isn't healthy. That zero means death. As far as I'm concerned, zero is an absence of anything. The designated urban service area, I'm just mentioning these things because these are things that the growth management task force are looking at. I was thinking about this, and I used to teach history. I used to teach English and history, and I remember my students, I was teaching ancient history, and we were talking about ancient Rome. And in ancient Rome, there was a wall around the city. And anybody who lived outside of this wall could not be a citizen of Rome, and you could not partake in the benefits of being a citizen of Rome. You also were conscripted into the army, and you had to fight for Rome, but you could not partake in the spoils of war. So these people were fighting, they partook, but they couldn't receive any of the benefits from it. So what good was it, even living near the supposed urban service area? Well, what happened is eventually they went on strike, and they said there has to be some process that happens where we become citizens and we can partake in this benefit of being near Rome or being near Missoula, let's put it that way. To just shut everybody out, well then on up to this point we'll have a sewer, and on the other side we're going to have filth pouring into town. That doesn't make sense either. There has to be a reciprocity that goes on. We have to learn to live with county. We have to do something, I believe, to make it reciprocal with fire, that we have to have the nearest station respond. And if taxes need to be reapportioned in a certain way, because everybody in the city lives in the county. And it should not be the city's total burden to do everything. But you cannot say, here's a line, I live on this side of the line, and you can just go sink, you know. It doesn't work. People are gonna get angry. Besides, we use those people. I mean, those people are part of us too. So,
Dave, you were lost.
should get an education.
So as you're campaigning, and I don't know how much, you know, do you sense any essential differences between yourself and Carolyn and Rosalind?
I do, and I hope, I hope that the three of us, that's what we can do here, is that to be fair to the voters, because frankly, I don't want to win the election if the people don't know what I'm about and I really can't represent them. So it's important to me, either at this forum or sometime between now and the primary or between now and the general, depending who gets there, that we let the voters know what the difference is. So I don't think we should BS around, and there's a lot of rhetoric and stuff about, you don't want to say the wrong things and stuff, but I want to be really upfront that these are the things that I believe in and I'll work for, and I hope you guys do too, so that the voters know, all right, Dave's for an urban service area, and if you aren't, say you're not. And if I'm really for growth management and you're not, then say you're not, or whatever the differences are. I think it's important we get those differences out. If I looked at the big picture and you asked me, and I hope you guys will correct me, because we don't get to talk to each other for some reason. I wish we could sit down and say, well, how am I different than you? And maybe that's what we're doing right here. So let's do this now, and so that I can go to people and I can tell them up front, this is how I'm different. This is what I stand for, and this is what they stand for. That would be really helpful. Because when I go to the doors now and I knock and I talk to people and I tell them all about myself, and they say, well, who are your opponents? I say, well, Carolyn and Rosalind Chadoff. And but I don't know much about them. I don't know how they're different. So I hope we can get some of that out. The way I view it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way I view it is that I'm a progressive Democrat. And to me what that means is that I'm interested in changing the way things are going. I agree we got to be smart about it. We got to do the right things. But when I look at the big picture, things are bad and we need to change things. My impression of you two is that you are maybe not so into changing things, being more conservative. That's how I see the philosophical difference between the two of us. Maybe I'm wrong, but I want to see things get done and changed because I think things are going pretty bad. Maybe Carolyn thinks things are okay and we shouldn't change so many things. That's my impression. If I'm wrong, I want to know, though.
Well, so before I shift back over to Carolyn, give us another couple of specific examples then of change. And when you talk about change, are you talking? And let me. I had made a few notes I was thinking as I went along. I mean, the minimum wage came up this year, mainly through Craig's suite, and it did certainly. I mean, I'm single, so I don't have as many worries as married folks with kids do, but it didn't strike me as a radical notion. I forget what the actual dollar and change figure was, but I thought I feel bad and guilty sometimes when I see young people who I don't know them, but I recognize them as being mothers with children and they're at the fast food places and late at night and trying to go to school and trying to do every doggone thing. And so my reaction just as a citizen is like, well, geez, that's not such a crazy idea, and so then I say to myself, well, how does this process work itself out? Because it seemed to me at the time that that idea was, at least in some quarters, treated as pie in the sky, as whatever. But anyway, so before we shift to Carolyn, you want to shoot out a couple of specifics and then?
Great. Yeah. Just real quick on the DUSA, the delineated urban service area, I just want to point out one thing about that. By having that into place, it allows the city to plan. How can you run?
You're gonna have to explain that, see.
Oh, the delineated urban service area, the line I was talking about drawing around a city and say, this is how big we're gonna grow.
I see.
There are some problems with it, but there's some benefits to it. And the benefit is that it allows you to plan. How can you run a sewer line out to the edge of your area unless you know, well, how big to make it, unless you know how far it's gonna go? The other thing, the alternative to doing nothing is to let things keep going the way they are. And that's unsatisfactory in my point of view. The minimum wage concept, that I think there's some confusion on that. What it was called was, you're talking about the living wage ordinance that the city was trying to pass for a while.
Yeah.
I support the living wage ordinance, but people have to understand what it means. All it means is that when we give tax incentives to companies to relocate to Missoula, which I think we should do, because we need more good-paying jobs here. But when we do that, we should require that they treat their workers better than dirt. Sun Mountain Sports, I guess, is a good example. We gave them a large tax break. They didn't treat their workers that great, and after 4 or 5 years, they pulled up stakes and left. We need to stop doing that. And what that'll do is, at least in some jobs, is if we require that a company that come in here. I'm not talking about if you want to get somebody to mow your lawn, or you hire somebody on a contract basis, or an existing business is already here. That's handled by the federal government, the minimum wage. But a living wage ordinance in Missoula means when we give tax incentives, we insist that they pay their workers a decent wage. The reason it makes sense is because if they don't do that, if they only pay them $5.50 an hour, we're going to end up picking the tab eventually, because you can't live in Missoula on $5.50 an hour. And they'll be on food stamps and all kinds of programs that the county will pick up, and eventually we'll end up paying for it. So it makes a lot of sense to me, and I'd support the living wage.
Carolyn.
Yes, McCarthy.
All right, your shot, your turn.
In anything in particular?
Hey, go for the area that you want to tell
Okay.
folks about.
Let's talk about the living wage then. I've never paid minimum wage, so personally, it's really hard for
You
me
mean
to
as
understand.
an employer,
business
you'd.
owner, we've
Yeah.
never paid that. But my concern is, when you start, first of all, I'm not sure that tax incentives are the way to get a business to come in to Missoula anyway. I believe that our infrastructure, the way we do business in Missoula, the requirements we require in general, as long as those are stable and understandable, and we have the good infrastructure, that's actually, and provide a good workforce, that's actually more of interest to businesses than tax incentives in a lot of ways. So I'm not convinced that's the way to do it anyway.
The tax
So-
subsidy route.
Yeah, that type of thing.
Mhm.
Now, when you look at asking those people, then we're not. So you said probably not existing businesses. So is it only larger businesses? Is it small businesses? So if someone comes in, we've been looking a lot for what we call clean industry. So that could be computers or even calling kind of industry that we would like to get in. And so maybe they only have 10 employees. Where do you draw the line? Who gets to live under this living wage, and who doesn't under these laws? And when you do, and then businesses look at this and they say, well, my competitor that I'm coming in to work in the same area is already here, does not have that restriction. I will. Where there's some difficulties there, most definitely, and determining that are we going to scare businesses away from that? So that is a concern of mine, most definitely.
As a business owner, is there anything in particular that you find, at least in terms of city and county government? I mean, we're concentrating on city, obviously,
Right,
but
concentrating
do you feel detrimentally affected as a business owner in particular, whether that's licensing fees or?
My business in particular, probably not. There are some very burdensome problems with a lot of things, but it's not just city. We're looking at city, state, county, national level. Right now, there's a lot that's expected of businesses in the way of paperwork and those type of things. So, but in particular, no, I don't believe the city in my particular instances has any very detrimental laws or regulations, but I know there are to some of the other, other businesses other than mine, but since they're not mine, I don't want to speak specifically to them.
And then before we continue going around, and this is an area that I'm interested in but don't know much about, but those of you who are, following city council assiduously, is this, the allowing the construction or conversion of backyard, garages and or whatever into, I'll call it uncle-in-law housing, or bachelor housing, artist housing, or whatever. I've been very interested in that and don't know too much about the city council has been looking at that somewhat, haven't they?
Well, I think
Allowing that, do you have any clue what
I think maybe what you're getting at is, what do you call it, integrated zoning, where you allow a number of different uses in one area.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
I'm really
Raj,
looking forward to a welding shop next door to me so that I can write better. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll tell you, see, one of the things that really, this is not a black and white situation. It's not a question, Dave, of being for something, against something. I'm a progressive, you're a conservative. You're making assumptions that are not necessarily true.
Okay, if
And
they're
I'm
wrong,
telling
then I
you-
hope
and the
you'll
other
tell me
thing
they're wrong.
is- The other thing is, I know that when I go door to door, I don't want to spend my time talking about anybody else. I don't talk about Carolyn, and I don't talk about
Right.
you. And if somebody asks me that question, what I say to them is, when they come to your door, you ask them what they feel, because everybody interprets in their own way. The other thing is, this is not a black and white situation. The city is definitely not a black and white situation. And as I said, for every action, there is a reaction that goes on. Nothing that we do does not affect everything. Everything gets affected. And one of the things when I was talking about the designated urban service area, I'm worried about the guy who's the last house in this DUSA, or whatever you want to call it. Here we have another acronym, that for this.
as in
that-
Anne Mary do so?
DUSA.
No, I'm.
DUSA. This is a DUSA.
Oh, okay.
But
I see,
anyway.
I see. Oh, all right, okay.
But,
I thought maybe she had a new
I don't want that.
philosophy named after her.
Could be. I don't want there to be, in other words, this poor person is gonna be on the sewer, and the person who's gonna be living next door to him happens to be over the line, and they're on septic or whatever, or maybe they even have an old cesspool that's seeping into their property. In other words, it's like building a wall. We're trying to shut out the rest. Rather, I feel that there should be a reciprocity where we all live in the same puddle. And at the point where it ends, and I do understand for planning and things like that, but where it ends is at a point where we in Missoula are not like living in New York City or living in Denver. I mean, I used to live in Boulder, Colorado many years ago, 1967 to 72, when it was sheer heaven on earth. No pollution, you never locked your door. I mean, things change, and it changed very fast. And there was nothing, 28 miles of polled Herefords and fields between Denver and Boulder. I was there 5 years ago, and it is wall-to-wall housing, wall-to-wall people, and you can't even afford to live there. Besides, the average house in Boulder, Colorado now is $350,000. That's not even within our realm, a lot of the people that we're talking about here in Missoula, Montana. And so what I'm saying is that I do not want to see, the point of where it ends is when you're into pasture land, when you're into area that is not designated for building and housing because of drainage, like for instance, they wanted to build up on Mount Jumbo. Well, we bought Mount Jumbo. I was very active in saving Mount Jumbo. I wanted to save Mount Jumbo from them building, but it was pasture land. It was zoned as pasture land. We've had zoning. Growth management is not necessarily a new concept. This has always been going on, and to rezone, everything has been zoned and rezoned lately. Instead of letting the zoning, take its form, they're not letting that happen. Everything now has an exception to it. There is nothing wrong with an R1 neighborhood. I lived in an urban area. I don't want to live in, once you start there are neighborhoods that can be multi-use, they're already multi-use to begin with. But I think that we can't make every neighborhood multi-use. It's not fair. You know, certain neighborhoods do not have the facilities, they don't have the land, they don't have the things in place to make this a good thing. The other thing is when you have a lot of people living on top of one another, it's a pie in the sky kind of idea to say, well, if we infill all this, and I mean on my property, that means I would have 4 houses. Right now, we have trouble with parking in Missoula. We have trouble with transportation. We are worried about all these cars. I'm not going to assume that all these people are going to ride bicycles. I'm going to assume that these people are going to have cars. And what I'm saying is that I lived in cities, and I do not want to see the urbanization of Missoula. And the idea of if I wanted to live in New York City, I'd live there. If I wanted to live in California, I'd live there. And if I wanted to live in London, where they live off a little mews and it's nice and quaint, that's fine. But that's living in a city. I live in a semi-rural area. I live in a city in a semi-rural and rural area. And I don't want to see wall-to-wall people eventually. And to infill and infill and infill and infill, crime goes up. People do not become neighborly. I know, I've lived in urban areas. People, when pressed in, they hold on to their personal things harder. You don't know who live next door. They don't want to talk to you. They come home from work and they want privacy. They've been surrounded by thousands of people during the day, and they want to come home and have some peace and quiet. They don't become, you cannot force a neighborhood. You cannot force them to be neighborly. I live in a neighborhood. I do live in a neighborhood where there's low or no crime. It's the most amazing bit of business. I've lived there for 10 years on the same corner. And it's not because we're living on top of each other. It's because we act in a neighborly manner. And one of the reasons why I think is we have enough room to breathe.
Okay.
But we're not too far apart either.
Just the wrap I'll put on the infill is, excuse me, I wanted to ask, how much time do we have to the end of our hour?
15 minutes.
Okay, thanks. And I'll take, on the infill housing, the only thing that I've thought about, again, as, you know, because I, like everyone in the world, would like my little space, right? And, you know, I have, you know, this tiny little bit of capital that I've been trying to, you know, that the only thing that I can make a house out of is somebody's garage, you know? And so that's how I perceive it, let's say, as someone who's an artist, a writer, you know, and who doesn't have a big income and probably never will, and yet I don't want to be dependent on the world or the city 10 years from now. You know, so, and I have lived in cities, and so I look and I say, well, you know, my buddy's got a garage or whatever that he, you know, wouldn't mind even selling to me, right? And then I convert that garage into a back alley, 1-room studio apartment that's, you know, clean and orderly and everything, and et cetera. So, I mean, there's no final point here, but when that comes up in city council, that does appeal to me, the idea of taking this limited amount of space we have in a, you know, a small city and say, well, no, I don't want to live out there anyway. I mean, I want to live in town. So that appeals to me. I just throw that out as a citizen.
Well, that wasn't necessarily, what I'm saying is, we hear that people don't want to change the character of Missoula. We love it the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you start doing this and subdividing and subdividing and subdividing, you are going to change the character of Missoula. There's no two ways about it. We are seeing already a change in the character of Missoula. We are seeing urban crime here, something, I've lived here 17 years, I had never seen urban crime. I am seeing urban crime, random crime, violent crimes that are different than what are rural or semi-rural or even suburban crimes. I mean, there's different kind of things going on here. And what I'm saying is, We have to, and it's not only my decision, I'm saying that we must look from step A to step Z, not just the step B, because there's all these things that happen when you do one thing, all these other things are going to happen. And we as the city, and we as the city council, are going to have to decide what the constituency wants. And it's not up to me. It's not only up to me. I'm the one who's gonna have to process all this information and then act upon that. But to just go to step B, that's why we are in the situation we are right now, is because we've only gone to step B.
I've got Dave chomping at the bit over here.
No, this has been great. It's good to hear what you guys have to say. I think the idea of building neighborhoods, well, first let me back up. Roz, there's a problem I have. See, when you go back to the big philosophical question, because I'm still trying to come up with ways that we're different so people will know how to vote. There's definitely a lot of similarities. We all care about Missoula. I've come up with some ideas, some proposals. Okay, maybe they're not perfect, but I've come up with ideas of things we should look at. What I want to hear from other people is, well, if you don't, for example, the growth management, okay, there's a limited number of choices. We either keep sprawling, we don't grow, or we infill. Now, one of those has got to be, one of those is going to happen. So if you don't like my idea or people's idea of controlling growth aggressively, then we have to think of what are the other alternatives? Because the impression I'm getting, and I hope I'm wrong, but the impression I'm getting is by not having any stances of your own or saying that you want to change things, my idea is that things are okay with you.
Is yours, or is that your party's idea? I'm just asking.
What?
Because I'll tell you something. You gave me 3 choices. I see more than 3 choices.
Okay.
There is more than infill. There is more than, what the 3 choices. There are more choices. Those are only 3. I don't agree with you. There aren't only 3 choices.
Okay.
There are more than that. And
What are they? I don't.
Well, this is your time. I'm just saying I don't agree with you.
Okay.
I said that there are more choices. I said we have to grow more slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe we have to grow more slowly. Growth is normal. We have to grow more slowly. But infill is not necessarily the only answer, because actually what you're saying is that is the only solution.
No,
Well,
I'm
what
not
are the
saying
other solutions? Out of the 2 other choices, one is to grow rampantly and sprawl. You gave me that choice.
Right.
And then you gave me the other choice of either growth management, which is just nebulous. I mean, that means a lot of things, which include a number of things, or infill. So in other words, you gave me one choice, one non-choice is to sprawl wildly, and the other was a nebulous choice.
Yeah, it is actually a choice to be able to keep going the way we are. And I think there's a lot of people there's some people I talk with in this town that are fine with the way things are going, and they would be okay with keep going the way we're going. So that is an option. My concept is that by having a delineated urban service area, we impose impact fees. The further you get away from the center of town, the more it costs to provide services there, so the more the impact fee. What that will do is force developers to build closer to town where where the services cost less, and it saves taxpayers money. We're talking, that's the thing I always hear on the doors is, my darn taxes are going up. Doing development that way, imposing impact fees, having some infill development will reduce taxes. Yeah, I know, Roz, everything's not black and white. I don't want to pick it black and white, but I want to try to come up with something so the voters know, well, who should I vote for? What is the difference, okay? And what the new party people and progressive Democrats kind of get beat up sometimes, I think, because we come up with ideas, creative ideas for solving some of the problems. When we don't hear creative ideas from other people, we assume that they must be pro-sprawl, they must be pro-low wages, they must be pro-high cost of living. Now, I know that doesn't make sense, but I'm not hearing good ideas about how to do those. So if you have them, I'd love to hear them. Like, how do we handle the low wage deal? I came up with a living wage concept, which is just one little segment of the economy. If you've got other ideas, I'm sure the voters would love to hear it, and I would too.
Carolyn,
Yes.
I always take you by surprise.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you had a little, because we're
About to wrap it up.
looking at, well, not quite, but I have a series of 1, 2, 3 quick questions for all of you.
Go for
And
it.
I wanted to have you, but I wanted to give you a shot at something, you know, before I did that, if you had something on your mind.
I believe, well, in particular, I believe there's a lot of other ways besides eliminating sprawl and imposing impact fees to lower our taxes. There's a lot of other things we're spending money on within the city government that are not our basic services that we need to look at. I mean, so when we talk about our budget, and you start talking about lowering taxes, I'm not even sure it's positive to lower taxes. I don't know that we can do that. But we can look at stopping some of the increments that we've had in our taxes.
Could you cite a couple of examples for me?
Of
when
things-
of the non-basic services that you think maybe the city is spending money on that?
I hate to pick out anybody in particular, but there are some staffing things, the things that we have. I mean, we were looking at our neighborhoods. We have the neighborhood councils. We voted in. We do, but there was not voted in that we would pay for them.
Right.
So that was one little thing, and granted, it wasn't a whole lot. We increased the Feet First coordinator to $36,000 a year. I just rode with one of our policemen who's been on the force for 6 years. He's not making that much a year. So I'm not saying that either one of those is more important than the other, but let's take a very careful look at where we want our taxes to go. And I don't believe that impact fees or other ways are the only way that we're going to lower taxes. I believe there's a lot of those different things.
So if I hear you right, you're saying one example would be a review of staffing requirements and
Staffing requirements.
in terms of the amount of money that's spent on staff salaries. Are there places to cut that? Is it?
That's just one
right,
area, most
right,
definitely.
right.
But that is something that, and I'm not out to take anybody's job.
Yeah.
But I think because we are under constraints, we are not going to be getting the revenue that the city would like to have. I mean, we'd all like to have unlimited budgets, but we can't. So let's be very, very careful about how we do spend the money we do have.
All right, in the time that we've got left, which isn't much, I don't think, and you mentioned, riding with a police officer and running the patrol, seeing how the job gets done, et cetera, one of those things. Sometimes I think that I'm a news junkie, so I read, papers, from New York and Washington and blah, blah, blah. And I sometimes think that we look at the outside world from Missoula and think that none of the problems that the outside world has that we have. For example, and this is based on all that stuff like police brutality, which comes up in major cities. At what point do we, as a city, decide to take a look and make sure that our police force is, in those areas doing the very best job that it can, that it's a shining example of civil treatment of, people who are getting in trouble or whatever. So that's really less of that's more of a statement than a question, but you had mentioned the police force, and I just think that sometimes we think that we're an island non-affected by, problems that occur elsewhere. Anybody think we should buy the water company as we did try about 15 years ago?
Then we can sue ourselves, it would be wonderful. I think we spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get it back after we didn't have it anymore, and from the way we've been using the sewer, we have the sewer, we run the sewer right now, and I know that every year, I don't know, I haven't heard about it because maybe the paper hasn't picked up on it in recent years, but every year there were fines because it was dumping raw sewage into the Clark Fork, and we had to pay huge fines for this, so we haven't been managing that so hot either. I think that the city should take on what it can chew first, and there are places where infill is called for. There are places where impact fees are called for. you can't blanket and tacitly say that this is good for every place, and it's not good for every place. I don't want to see urban sprawl either. I'm appalled by urban sprawl. Like I said, I am somebody who comes from cities, but I've lived here for 17 years, and frankly, I've lived out of a big city longer than I lived in a city, and I know what it's like. And Missoula is a fine place, and I believe that we are working on things. I know we tried buying the water company, if you remember.
Right, right.
And it didn't work. And then if they make a mistake, what do you do? What recourse do we have?
Dave?
Were you getting to the campaign finance
If
stuff?
you wanted to, jump right in.
Yeah, I think it's important that, politics, I told my dad I was running for city council and he about keeled over and died. This anti-government feeling across the country, and it's really relevant knocking on the doors. A lot of people are like, oh, they ought to just shoot everybody on city council kind of reaction sometimes. And I think and they've got kind of a legitimate gripe at times if you look at the way campaign finance has been going and all of the unethical things that have been going on. I proposed to everybody running for the city council races that we put a spending cap of $3,000 on. I didn't get a very good response. I want people to know why I think that's important, though. What local politics should be about is about people meeting other people, getting to know them, and knowing what they think about the issues. It should not be about who has the most money. It costs $4.4 million to run for U.S. Senate, $600,000 to run for the House seat. That's not what America was based on. That's not equal chance for everybody. And we should start it here at the grassroots level and say something right here at the city council, one of the lowest forms of government, and then let it filter up through. It shouldn't be about, for this election, it shouldn't be, well, who can afford the biggest TV ads and the most radio spots, and that's going to be the winner. Is that what their government was set up for? No, it's a representative government. So I still urging my opponents, I think you guys both declined to the $3,000 spending cap
No.
verbally.
No, that wasn't it at all.
Well, wait, hold on a second. So, let me just ask this, and just to cap this part of it. So how much so far have you wound up spending?
Geez, we've already spent don't quote me exactly,
Yeah,
but I
right.
think we raised $1,800. No, we raised $2,100, and we've got like $800 left. So we must have spent $1,300.
Any radio or TV spots at all?
Approximately, no.
Yeah. Okay. Carolyn, what have you raised and spent more or less?
I haven't raised that much. I've raised under 2,000 and have spent under that
Right,
amount.
right.
Yeah, quite a bit less than that.
And Rosalind?
And I've raised way under 2,000, and I've only spent $1,371. And the reason that I didn't is I had just filed for city council. You had already filed for 2 months, and I said there might be a third person who might file, which there was, and we never talked about it, but I said I'm interested in a spending cap, and we just never discussed it any further, and the assumption was that we weren't interested in any, and everything is public knowledge, so it will all be in the newspaper.
So can we agree to it now? Let's all agree to a spending
Not
cap
really.
of $3,000.
It's already done.
Everything's already done. I have no intention.
It's way under it anyway, so what difference does it make? It's a moot point at this point.
It's not a moot point for the voters, I don't think, that if we can set an example and say.
Well, I'm way under that.
Right, so no
so
problem
is
with
she.
setting the cap then.
No, I don't want to
Okay.
set a cap.
All right.
Now I don't. Not on the screen.
Anybody following, did I see a figure of $24 million in order to coordinate the traffic light signal system? Am I right on that figure?
I don't know.
I thought it was a little less, but I'm not sure exactly.
Whatever it was like it was pretty high, wasn't it?
pretty high.
And I wish one of you knew something about that, because it seemed way too high to me. And maybe I'm more radical than any of you are, but I thought that was something that.
How much was it?
I thought I saw a figure of 24 million, which, but I don't
It
want
may have
to.
been a part of the 24 million. I know that the lights themselves cost close to 5 million.
Right. I guess what Go ahead.
And so, you know, what the actual setting that up,
Right,
I'm not positive.
right,
I haven't seen the
right.
results of that yet, so
It
we'll
does
have to
save
see how.
money, though.
Well, I guess, but I guess when you guys were talking about impact fees and stuff like that, I said, well, wait a minute, Montana Power Company winds up getting money from us for paying the power bill, so that would be an example where, if I was a candidate, I'd say, well, why does the Montana Power Company then, that's an impact fee, of sorts, right? In other words, we're trying to modernize our community and, set the traffic lights in order. And so then I thought, well, why can't Montana Power Company, chip in on that? But anyway, lately, for the first time that I can remember, and we've got what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? 2 minutes. That the Native American community in Missoula has been, starting to raise up a bit of a, storm about, how they feel, particularly their children in the public school system being, not treated very well at all, and they seem very serious about it, and it was just something that was troubling to me when I read it, and I guess I'd gone to a meeting in which it had come up, and frankly, unlike the rest of, I suppose, at least some Anglos, I stay unaware until it's called to my attention. So I guess another point there about I don't know what the city council, if anything, could do to encourage taking a look at this, or whether that's exclusively the school board or what have you. But it was just something that was on my mind since it hit the press. We got 2 minutes to wrap it up. And let's see, we started with Carolyn, so we'll start to finish with you. The primary is Tuesday, and thanks to all of you for running. It's not an easy job, I know. And so, Dave, take a shot.
Yeah, well, I might just start off by saying, if I hope I didn't come across as being confrontational. My goal here was really to try to let the voters know what some differences were, and I hope, and I think there are some differences, and maybe they got a feel from it. I know everything's not black and white, but I hope they came out with some idea, so they'll know how to vote. I hope if they decide to vote for me, they realize what they're getting, and what they're going to get is somebody who'll stand up for the working class, somebody who cares about the difference between the low wages and the high cost of housing in this town, and somebody who wants to do something about managing growth in the city.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Roz, about 50 seconds.
I love Missoula. I wasn't born here. I'm not a native Montanan, but I feel like I am now. And Missoula, to me, is still a healthy place. It's a lot healthier than a lot of other places. And I just am tired of horse out of the barn door politics, and that's what I call it, is we do something, and then a month later, a year later, 5 years later, we go, oh my goodness, it's caused this, and that. Because we need to think further ahead with what is happening in Missoula. We can't just use Scotch tape. We've been using Band-Aids and Scotch tape to fix things. And a lot of these things, they sound like they're good ideas, and some of them are good ideas. But to spread it out over everything, it doesn't fit. For instance, if you have a gushing wound on your arm, you don't put a Band-Aid on it, you gotta put a tourniquet. In another place, you might have something that's an irritation, so you need a moleskin on it. And it's the same thing with the city. I think that the Growth Task Force is doing a great job doing what they're doing. It is not a simplistic idea. We can't come up with we're a very complex city. And I believe that that we are looking forward to a healthy community with everybody working together on city council, and I hope that we can do that with common sense.
Thanks. And Carolyn Overman.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to urge everyone who is registered to vote. Whatever you do, just get out there and make sure you exercise that right that you do have. It's very, very important. I believe that I can be a voice for all of the constituents in our ward. I feel very comfortable as I've been out walking and talking to the people. I hear wonderful, wonderful comments in general just about our city and the public that's very well informed, and I do appreciate the time to come in and speak.
Thanks very much, all of you, for taking the time to be here with us at Missoula Community Access Television. And thanks to the crew, and we'll see you next time. This is McCarthy Coyle, and you've been watching A Public Conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's good.
Next time you need to get air conditioning.
It's hot in here.
I'm not.
Actually,
the one
no,
who's-
there, actually,
Are you
there,
the-
there is
it's
air,
a hot
con- there is
flash.
air, con- there is air.
That's what it was.
Are we going?
Three.
Howdy, as they say, as we say in Montana, howdy. My name is McCarthy Coyle, and you're watching A Public Conversation, a special edition of A Public Conversation, taped last Thursday, 2 days ago, but you're watching it on Sunday, 2 days before an important primary election. Tuesday, September the 9th, is primary election day in Missoula, Montana. And this is maybe someone who knows their political history better than myself, but this is our first non-partisan election. Back in June, we voted to change the form of our city government, and we also voted to switch from partisan to non-partisan elections. And it's my understanding that no one has quite figured out what that means yet, but we're, I guess, learning as we go along. And in this Ward 6, many of you may be more familiar with the gentleman to my right, Craig Sweet, who's been on the city council 4 years, right, Craig? And he's the incumbent, and he has a challenger,
Number
Tracy
2, right?
Turek, on my left, and
Okay, there's a
there are
2
two
with
other
that.
challengers, that is to say, Bob
Kelly.
Kelly, who is ill and unable to come, and Steve Larson, another challenger who had other things that he had to accomplish. So we just have the three of us, and so we can monopolize the conversation. Tracy Turek works for the state of Montana in water rights,
Yes.
and her background was in
I love
environmental
Tracy.
studies at
Forestry.
at the University of Montana. And Tracy's the mother of a son who is 2 years old today. And I'm going to start out with you, Tracy, and say specifically, why are you in this race? And assuming that the fates go with you and you were to be elected to the city council, could you give me an example of one law and or policy that you would want, if there was nothing else that you could achieve in your term of office, what would you be working on in the positive sense of passing something, and what would you like to see changed? Again, try and be as specific as possible, eliminating a particular law or policy.
Okay. First of all, the reason I decided to run for city council was I've been very active in the last 5 years with trying to get individuals within the city some property relief from the Missoula Irrigation District. And we've tried over many years to work with the district. We've had task forces. The previous mayor, Dan Kemmis, set up a task force. We've tried over the years to work with the irrigation district, and then this last session, Mr. Mike Halligan introduced a bill, and so I was very involved with that. And then when the elections for city council came about, some friends asked me that thought that I could, maybe make some common sense decisions, so that's why I decided to run. As for what's the biggest thing to change, I don't have any specific issue or cause that I'm involved with, but I would like to see the city council maybe be more friendly and be more consistent with their planning, and so when developers come in, that they're treated fairly.
And the follow-up was again, of course I took you by surprise, but any specific law or policy that you think is either, worthless or ineffective or not being executed right now, just like in your water rights situation, is there anything that you would like to see change that we're governing under now?
Again, I don't have any specifics.
Right.
I'll just look at each issue as they arise, and then, make the best decision I can based on all the information I receive.
Well, I did want to thank all the candidates for running, for taking that on. I'm always yakking about politics and complaining about it, but you don't see me running, and I would. So thanks for doing that. And I was, I must say, because now I'm connecting up your water rights thing. That was, and to put it in layperson's terms, that was the question of, like, you were having to pay ditch fees for water that you never got to use.
Correct.
And this has been going on for 80 or 90 years for a lot of people, right?
Yes, many people.
So, I mean, I think it would be appropriate, even in this context, to say, I did read about that, and I thought, well, good for you, and good for someone who was willing to, say this is ridiculous, and you took it on, and you followed it through, and you got it done, and good work.
Thanks.
Craig, so you've had a Craig Sweet. You've had a Craig runs a nursery, right?
I do.
That's how you
Yep.
make your living, and then you came out to Montana to go to the university back in the early '80s, or
1983.
and then didn't follow through on your original
Right.
plan, right?
Right.
But
I attended graduate school for about a year, and then went to work in the garden center business.
Right.
I've been doing that ever since.
Right. And, all right, so you were first elected to the city council 4 years ago, right?
Right.
And what has been what are you most proud of in terms of what you've been able to accomplish, and what has been your biggest disappointment?
Probably the thing that I'm most proud of is steering the council through 2 strategic planning sessions. And each year we get a little bit better at doing our strategic planning, where we sit down and determine what it is we want to accomplish in the coming year or 18 months, what we would like to see government produce, and how we will go about it.
You do that as a whole?
We do that as a council as a whole, and it's a facilitated couple of days. The first year we actually did the strategic planning with staff, and it was a rather interesting exercise to have 75 staff members in the council all in one room, but it was real unique to do it that way. I mean, if you think about most businesses, they might take their upper level management or the board of directors and they do the strategic planning for the company. And the lower level management and the staff don't really get that involved. So it was quite unique to apply some of these business principles to government and involve our staff. Last year, we did it quite a bit different, and we did 2 different strategic planning sessions, one with the council and one with the staff. And out of the strategic plan flows the budget, and out of the budget comes work plans and what we accomplish for the year. In many ways, I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of. Though there are lots of little things. You know, when you get on the council, you come in there and you think you're going to have these grandiose ideas of changing the world, and it just doesn't really happen because there's 11 other council members and 11 other constituencies out there in the community. So, you know, you take a lot of joy in little tiny victories along the way. One thing that I'm probably most disappointed about is just still that inability to get a grasp on 11 other people and get us moving down the road, trying to think collectively to solve problems. There's always going to be the renegades in any bunch who want to go off on this direction, off in that direction, and throw the monkey wrench into the works. But, you know, any group of people, and the council's no exception, will do its best work when there's all 12 of us and we're all trying to problem solve and we're not that wrapped up in special interests that might be telling us how we should be approaching a problem. If we can just go in there and problem solve as a group, you know, good work has come from it when we've been able to function that way, but we don't always function that way, and that's probably my biggest disappointment. And you know, as a leader on the council, it's doubly disappointing.
But Tracy, do you follow? Do you follow the budget matters too much, or have you been able to take a look at you know, how the city spends its money at all? And have you any thoughts in that regard?
I haven't explored the budget that much. I do believe that the government, the city government, should concentrate on basic services, however. Police protection, fire protection, infrastructure. I think that's what most taxpayers want from their government, is basic services, so they have a safe community to live in and to drive in. And so I haven't been very involved in the budget, but I think that things should be looked at, so we concentrate our money and our funding on those basic services.
McCarthy?
Yeah,
you know,
go.
one thing, you know, I agree with Tracy, and one thing we're going to do this year is we're going to take at least 2 departments and maybe as many as 5 departments and essentially zero base their budgets and make them start from zero and justify their expenditures and apply that type of budgeting technique. And it'll be something new and something different we haven't ever tried before. And you know, it means taking a good hard look at how each department is spending their money and prioritizing a little bit better. And I think we'll get some pretty good results from doing that, because, you know, we're aware that there's a shrinking amount of dollars out there from taxpayers. Yet our costs, like the cost of anything, continually rise all the time. And when you're sitting there and you're just looking at a budget and you're thinking, police, fire, that's a given. And then you start looking at Parks Department, and you go, well, if we don't irrigate the parks, all the softball players and soccer players are going to be screaming on the phone, why is the grass brown? Or, you know, and then you start looking at something else, and you think, well, 65% of the people supported the open space bond, the ones that voted, you know, so apparently they want open space. Well, now we got to manage it, you know, and it becomes quite complex. But I think by zeroing down some of these budgets and taking that kind of look administratively, I think we're going to end up in the long run with a leaner budget.
Now, you say your friends, noting the good work that you did on this ditch business and getting the law changed up in Helena so that you get some fairness and stop paying the fees for something that you weren't using, and that admiring, you know, your tenacity and the work you did there. They said, well, why don't you take a shot at the council? But I'm still trying to dig into your head and see. Well, there must be something.
Don't let them do it.
There must be something in there that within the city that you see that's either lacking or that you want to have happen, or something that's motivating you other than just your friends saying, "Geez, you're a good person. You're a hard worker."
For one, I just became annexed in the city.
I
So
see.
prior to this past couple of years, I wasn't eligible to run for
I
city
see.
council. And I was asked a few years ago, but I couldn't because I wasn't in the city. And so now that I'm in the city, I really believe Missoula is a great place. I have a 2-year-old son, and I want him to be able to grow up in this great city and have the opportunity to stay here if he so chooses when he grows up. So I feel that, like you said earlier, a lot of people talk about change and talk about helping, and I just feel that this is an opportunity for me to help steer the future of Missoula. The people in our ward are very concerned about the annexation and what their tax dollars are going for. And the sewer project is a very big issue right now, and the costs and what people can expect now that they're annexed in the city. So that's another reason that I
Okay.
decided to run.
Okay.
And so to hopefully maybe keep the people informed and make sure that the people in my ward, and especially the newly annexed individuals, do get the services that they were, that they're expecting.
So were you annexed before or after the election in which we voted for a new form of city government this last June?
That I'm not sure.
Well,
I don't know when
it was a year ago,
actually.
June, didn't we voted in?
I've lost the year
Yeah, it was a
somewhere.
year ago, June, and we annexed a year ago, December, didn't we?
I think so. And then there was some protests. I think there was a
No, but I
suit.
mean, when did we vote for nonpartisan elections?
June of 95, 96.
June of, right.
June
so
of 96.
June of 96.
We annexed in December of 96.
Okay,
or-
so
or no-
you didn't have the
or
opportunity to
95.
vote in that election.
I think they did. I think we annexed in December of 95.
Oh, I see. Okay,
I think we
December
did.
of 95. And do you recall voting in that?
I kind of do, because I remember all the
When we had to vote on neighborhood councils
Mhm.
and
The
Mhm.
charter.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
only I wanted to get to the neighborhood
Mhm.
councils business. Do you have one in your ward that's active at all?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Not-
It is a real
yeah.
new kind of concept, and
Right.
and especially in the fact that a large portion of the ward now has just become annexed.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's been any active,
I don't think so.
I see.
When I first got on the council, I worked with some folks over by McLeod Park, which is over by the Jefferson School, and Brook South Russell area, and it was mostly because of the whole changes that were proposed for Malfunction Junction. It was going to impact that neighborhood, so I worked with them, and they got a neighborhood group going, but I don't think they're real active. Probably the closest would be what's going on and the people that came together over the annexation. I mean, those people probably still get together occasionally.
Well, finally,
I heard they do.
Yeah.
I was getting to the point here of I know there was that some people, both on the council, I guess, and within the community, some were pleased and some were not pleased that there was what seemed to be such a modest amount of money allocated to help energize and get the neighborhood councils up and going. And so I wanted to ask both of you whether you think having more money allocated for those purposes would be healthy. Anyway, whoever wants to.
Well, I think we finally allocated about $25,000, maybe.
For the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, that's to help get a handful. It looks as if initially there will be, there's 16 or 18 total, and we figured there'll be at least 8 or 10 that are going to be ready to go quite soon, because there's already some very active neighborhood associations out there. And to pay for the coordinator, and that person, I believe, we're in the interviewing process of hiring the person who will coordinate that and act as a liaison between neighborhood councils and the city council. But, it wasn't like there was a lot of money in the budget. The mayor presented a budget that had a 0.75%, less than 1% increase over the year before. It was a very, very tight budget. And, yeah, there was money in the cash reserves, but, it's like anything. You don't go dipping into your cash reserves when you know that a rainy day is going to be coming sometime. And I think $25,000 will get them up and rolling.
Let me switch it now. You were a county resident for a long time, right? And did you resist annexation, and then it just happened, and then it got done, or? I asked that question really to ask a more significant one, since there was a time when you were a county resident and not a city resident. Now you're a city resident running for city council. Do you see a future, or do you see any potential advantage, in a city-county form of government like Butte Silver Bow has?
First of all, I was not against the annexation.
Okay.
We're basically so close to the city
Right.
that, to me, it was only logical that we're
Right.
part of the city. The one thing I did not like about being so close to the city was if I had an emergency and I needed the city police at that time, years ago, could not come in. You'd have to wait for a county sheriff, and that sometimes took a long time. So I really like the fact we have police patrols. I see the police cars drive by. And I like the fact too that we are going to benefit from those services. They did plow our roads last year. With all the snow, I know it took a long time. You got to get the major arteries clear, but they did come down several times. And in fact, the stop sign on our street corner got knocked over last weekend, and they were out there early in the morning replacing it. So I was for annexation. Another reason I was for annexation is because of the infrastructure too. I really feel very strongly that we need to keep our aquifer clean. And individual septics, and especially in the older homes that we have in our district, the individual septic systems are not adequate whatsoever. And I firmly believe it will be much more cost effective if we keep our aquifer clean than if it gets polluted. If we have to treat our drinking water, it's going to be very expensive. So to me, it's only logical that we have to do something with the sewer system. So the information that I had too, with the annexation for the part that was annexed, with the increased population, we're just about there, and Craig may correct me here, that if we reach the certain number, that we will be able to be in a new, basically, category for obtaining additional funds, which will help everyone.
Entitlement.
Yeah.
So it will help pay for the cost of the mains and everything else to
More
help
money
people.
from the feds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so I was not against annexation. Now the next question was the city county.
Yeah, possibility.
I think the city and the county need to work together. The city's expanding, and the city is basically the heart of the county too. The county offices are located right here in the city, and I really think that every elected official, both in this city and the county, should be able to work together to solve the common problems. Sure, there's going to be differences in opinion and views, but I think we all should have the same common goal as assisting the people.
And that's one thing I think we're going to do. As Tracy mentioned, we reach a certain population level, we reach entitlement status, and it appears we have reached that level. We'll know probably in a few more weeks for sure. And then that means instead of going out and competing with all the other cities in Montana for sewer money or any kind of money for infrastructure, we will automatically receive the money, the entitlement grants. And typically, a city our size would receive about $900,000 per year, maybe a little between $700,000 and $100,000 and $1 million. And we did make a commitment to the people out in the area where Tracy lives that we would help pay for part of that sewering. And, you know, so far, we're right on track. We've gotten some grants, Treasury State money and other monies. And, you know, I think one thing that's going to be real important is our flexibility. There are some folks over on Fifth Street who put in their own sewer, and one person went and organized about 7 or 8 households. They went out and hired a contractor, and they worked with the city on this, you know, to get all the approval, because you do need certain permits to connect into the sewer. And they saved a bundle of money. You know, they got a contractor at a right time, apparently, who could come in and do it. And, you know, quite a bit less than the numbers we've been throwing around of maybe $10,000 to $12,000 per house. They did it for anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 per house, depending on how far they were from the main. And I think that kind of flexibility, where we can allow people to do that and still help them, will go a long way. Because, as Tracy said, you know, once the aquifer becomes polluted and you can no longer use it, and you were here long enough to remember when we were trying to condemn mountain water.
Well,
you know,
and then buy it.
To buy it, well,
Right.
condemn it and then buy it.
Right.
The price tag was pretty darn high.
Right.
And to go back to using the rattlesnake water and putting a big filtration plant up there, we're probably looking at $20 million just to build the plant. And we just don't have that kind of money, you know.
Okay, I want to know more. I want to understand this more clearly, because I was someone who, you know, wanted to buy the water company. I mean, a lot of cities in the United States own their own water companies. It's like a civic thing, so I was very disappointed when the city decided not to appeal. Were you here when that happened, or was that right?
It was probably right about that time you and I both moved in.
Probably, yeah. I don't.
But we wanted to condemn and buy, and then the water company took us to court, and then we lost, I don't know, 1 or 2 decisions, and then the city basically decided that they weren't going to spend any more money on lawyers, right? I mean, wasn't that the gist of it? And I thought intuitively, as a citizen, that I'd rather own my own water supply. And is there any? Does that kind of a posture make sense? And is there any reason why we should think about that in the future, or is that kind of a moot point?
I think it's just one of those kind of things you can study it to death. You know, if you own your own water and you've got your own sewer, well, you've got the 2 components, the engines of annexation, you know, to bring people online. You know, I mean, mountain water runs water into places that's not in the city. So, you know, you've got the 2 biggies right there for infrastructure for that whole engine of annexation. You know, all over the country, from what I'm reading, the big privatization, though, is cities are turning their sewer plant operations over to private enterprise to operate their sewer. You know, the city may still own them, but they contract out the operation. So, you know, and they seem to work in many cases, you know, but whether we could own our own water and you know, I mean, add the staff to run the water company to take that on, make it work, boy, you know, that'd be a tough one.
I agree.
Yeah.
You must have, some night you must have sat down, maybe more than once, and figured, how many hours a week do you think you put in on city council work?
It varies tremendously. I mean, there was the week we were talking about Mansion Heights, and we were having some meetings with John Felton. I was at City Hall way more than I was at my business. I mean, probably I spent 8 hours at my business and the other, you know, 32 hours of that week on council business. And then there are weeks where, in the summer, you know, and you've seen the meetings where you go in there and you get Rocket Jack Reedy chairing the meeting, and we're out of there in 5 minutes, you know, and you don't have any committee meetings that week, and it's kind of a nice little break. But I would say on average 15 to 20 hours, and some council members put in quite a bit more than that.
And you get how much a month? 6 something?
No,
They just raised it a little bit, didn't they?
yeah, 1.5%. I think as council president, I make a little more than the other council members, and I take home about $300 every 2 weeks. So I take home about $600 a month.
Think it's fair?
I think it's fair enough. I mean, the big issue is, do you need 12 council members or not? Could you do better with only 6? and pay people more money. You know,
So
if
does
Tracy
that-
gets on the council or any of these other people who work like I work do, they're gonna find that you no longer have a life. Your kid will be 5 years old, 6 years old, and you'll be scratching your head wondering where the time went, you know? It really does take your time, you know?
Okay. I had some, we've been, certainly in the past, I've been here 20 years, and we've been known as a social issues city, I think. I think that's a fair description, a city that has been interested in, matters that affected not only the community, but the state and the nation, and we've been one of those Montana communities that's been willing to, take on maybe not every issue, but on many issues. Are you someone that thinks that's healthy? I mean, should we be in the posture? Now, you took on the legislature. You moved something through there. Should we continue to exercise that, let's say, as a city government? Should we be willing to, to use our influence as city government, as city council people, to affect what happens in, Helena and what happens in Washington and wherever?
If the citizens of Missoula think a social issue is important, I think that gets noticed. And if there's concerns that the citizens of the city are very concerned about, that then they bring to the city council, and the city council feels it's a large enough issue that they should get involved, then by all means. But I really think that we should listen to what the people of Missoula want from their city government, because that's what it is. It's a government for the city, and I think that's a very precious relationship. And so, if the citizens again feel that there's a social issue that needs to be brought forth, like this morning they were talking about the bookstores and the nude dancing, and that was a social issue that individuals felt needed to be brought in front of the council, and they did, and it was voted on. And so I think in that respect, if there's a social issue that the citizens feel is important enough, that then should drive what the city council does.
Comments?
I think, in the case of some of these social issues, there are ballot referendum forums to get them on a ballot, and I think that's real appropriate for citizen initiation of a ballot issue. I used to think, that it was really important that the city council did a resolution in support of this or that, of getting the troops out of Nicaragua or whatever, the cause was at the time. But, more and more we begin to realize that it doesn't have any impact, and it does take time to draw up the resolution, to debate the resolution, to talk about the resolution. And I find that the group of people on the council now would rather spend their time trying to solve city problems and not spend all this time dealing with some of these resolutions that we've dealt with in the past. Because the last one that was real noticeable, was something, I think it was the greater Rocky Mountain ecosystem region, and, yeah, we're part of it. We live in it. The one that, there's conflicting proposals, but whether that was the best use of our time or not was the question. And it's something you have to think about, because, again, most of us have jobs, and we come down here, you don't want to spend 3 hours talking about,
philosophical things that you may not be
Right.
able to.
That
we really
can't move
effectuate,
forward.
right.
Let's jump to, I just thought of this more specific example, the Yellowstone pipeline proposal. Now that's something that has a greater and more immediate impact, at least on the region. I don't know the route, I mean, how it proceeds past the city or what have you, but not that I'm pushing that. I'm not a green per se, but it would seem to me that would be the kind of thing that is significant enough that as I read the paper and listen to the radio and TV, that it's already significant, and that what would happen to something like that before city council? I mean,
well, I think if it were coming through Missoula, that definitely would be an issue. I think if if it were going through Frenchtown and the state of Montana or the federal government was telling the town of Frenchtown they didn't have any voice in it, then I think it's legitimate for us as another city to pipe in and say, hold on, we think they do, because there's gonna come a time where they're gonna say the same thing to us, and we have to stick together. And that's why we have the League of City and Towns. So I think that's appropriate. If a handful of landowners out in Houston, they'll have a problem with the Yellowstone pipeline, I don't know how appropriate it is, or what effect we even have on that decision.
I agree also. If it was going through the city, it would be a different matter. But the people up in 9 Mile and Houston, they have been very active, and there has been many public meetings. In fact, our office has gone to several of the meetings because there are some water right issues that they would have to deal with. But I agree with Craig that, unless it, directly affects the city, we're elected to handle our city problems.
Okay, then let me bring up another one along the same lines. Some citizens, I suppose I would have to include myself in that some, are concerned about the safety record of Montana Rail Link, which is, coming right to the middle of the city and out to Hamilton, etc., and things like that. And I don't know what we as a city can do, or what city government could do to encourage, greater, that they do more and better, because that's what I want them to do, more and better. I mean, Alberton was pretty scary, and all of a sudden, now I realize that there's people in Alberton that are still working on that issue, and I'm not talking about lawsuits and all that stuff, but. Somehow that's dropped off the radar screen in terms of I still don't know exactly what happened. I know what happens when a plane goes down in Florida, and I read about it every day, and stuff like that. Here's this awful thing in Alberton, and I don't know anymore where things are at. So I raise this up because I think sometimes when we have a company like Montana Rail Link that is making money. Denny Washington has a good reputation, as an entrepreneur and an industrialist, multimillionaire, hometown boy made good, and therefore, I'm taking a long way in this circle back to city council, is what responsibilities does city council have in that a more immediate sense, is that they're right here. They're, and do we have any options or opportunities of if nothing else, putting the heat on and saying, well, how many crew have you got? Are you checking the rails? End of sermon. But comments.
That was a good one.
Comments,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
I'm all for making sure that they follow safety regulations that, would dictate any type of accident they would have. And I would hope that they are working with the local authorities and have action plans and practice those action plans in case there are an emergency. Anything that possibly could, detrimentally affect our population, we should make sure is safe and, the people are protected.
Okay, well, I think the key that I heard just now was that, in terms of the city, that I heard you say was, are our local, police, fire, etc., ready to go, and is Montana Rail Link actively working with them? You didn't, not using my
We
own
do
words,
that.
to,
We do.
Yeah,
We
and
have
that's-
plans. We're notified immediately. Whenever there's any kind of derailment, there's also the emergency committees that members of Rail Link and the other potential larger businesses that might have a problem that would impact the community. They're involved with it. But the important thing, and Tracy knows this from her work, is her agency and the city, we work with Rail Link all the time on many different projects. So you're constantly building a relationship with them. And through building that relationship, you know, you get the trust and you get the understandings, and you begin to have better relationships in these other areas where you're cooperating on being prepared to deal with any types of disasters and that type of thing. And you have to take that attitude that we're going to work with them and they're going to work with us, and we invite them to sit at the table and participate. And you know, they do that with the water board, I'm sure. And that's just the way it has to be. You know, when they pull one of these disasters at the airport, you know, all the agencies that are involved would amaze you, and but they've all been involved all through the year on working and being prepared. And the same is true with MRL. You know, yeah, someday there could be a real disaster right here. Albertson's derailment could have happened right out here at Van Buren. You know, and it would have been way more serious.
Definitely. And that's my, as long as they are working with the city and everyone is cooperation, you know, is working cooperatively to make sure that the public safety factor is the first and utmost, you know, if anything happens. That, to me, you know, that's where it should be.
Let's see. Well, I'm enjoying this conversation, if no one else.
Well, you give us a good sermon every now and then, you know.
This, do you think the city, you know, I mean, this is an argument that goes on all over the country. In fact, during an earlier panel that we taped this afternoon, one of the candidates for city council made the point that she didn't think that this whole issue came. All right, this actually leads. Okay, this is the man who, at least, whose name is associated with the living wage. Isn't that what it's generally called?
Living wage,
right?
okay.
And I'll give you a shot to explain that briefly. So why don't you do that?
Living wage is based on the U.S. federal government's statistics as to what it would take to pay a person per hour to get them at a poverty level wage, or reach the poverty level. And for a family of four, I think poverty level is $15,000 a year. They'd have to earn roughly $7.50 an hour to reach that level, and that's basically what the living wage is all about.
Okay, and in the context of this earlier panel discussion, one of the candidates made the point in this discussion of the living wage that she didn't, in any event, didn't think that there was, and I'm paraphrasing her words, obviously, but I'm pretty close. But she didn't think that tax, because I think your proposal was linked particularly to businesses that might receive some kind of tax subsidy or incentive or whatever from city government in order to locate here or expand here, right? It would be mainly aimed at those would be the companies that would be required to supply that living wage, correct?
Correct.
And
that was the original proposal.
Right, okay. Did you keep up with that when that was kind of?
A little bit.
Uh-huh.
My view on that is there is a federal minimum wage, and I have a problem with the fact of if we, for one, don't play in an equal playing field again. New businesses have to go by different standards than the old businesses. I don't think that's fair, and I have a fear if we across the board then in within the city or whatever say, okay, you have to pay this living wage, I think that's going to be very detrimental to the businesses we have here. A lot of small businesses could go out of business, and new businesses potentially may not want to relocate here. And the other problem you may have is that if you do that, businesses may just pick up and move outside the city limits. So that effectuates the urban sprawl, and then they would a lot of times be outside the infrastructure and the services. So I think it could have some grave consequences. I understand the hardships people are having. I have a son in daycare. I know how much daycare is. It's not cheap, and it's just a fact that most households, both parents have to work, and I understand that. But I think if we bring in new business and have opportunities for growth, that the higher paying jobs, everyone then can move up the proverbial ladder. And so that's where I stand on the living wage issue. I think it could have some grave consequences that would affect not only the lower income individuals, but it could affect everyone.
I think when I was first raised the issue of living wage, and I talked to a friend of mine who has a business quite a lot larger than my business, but nevertheless a small business person, probably employing 15 people, maybe more than that. And he told me, he said, well, he said, I don't have a problem with living wage. Because, if I have to go and ask the city for tax help or tax incentives, or if I'm looking for something from the city, it's just like going to the bank. He said, when I go to the bank, and the bank says, yeah, we'll give you the loan, but we want monthly financial statements. That is the price I pay for going to the bank. He said, when I put my hand in the city cookie jar, and they tell me you're going to have to pay your employees $7.50 an hour, then that's the price I pay for asking for the assistance. And he said, then I have a choice. I can take it or leave it. In hindsight, my feelings about it are, one, lead by example. So what I'm trying to do with the business I operate is pay people a living wage for the work they do. And hopefully as the business grows and we're able to offer other benefits, be able to do that as well, as part of let's everybody share in this experience and not just me be the one who becomes the fat cat. The second thing is, I think what we need and what I think will happen in the next 4 years, along with the council coming up with a real economic development plan that works, is we will have a forum or put together a committee that will look at wages and poverty in our community. And much like we did with the Affordable Housing Committee several years ago, that came forth with a 20-point recommendations for how we could have affordable housing in our community. And this was made up of people from all walks of life, and they talked about, well, first, is there a problem? And then second, if there is a problem, how can we change it? What can we do to raise everyone's wages? How can we do that? And they come forward with some recommendations. Right now there isn't a lot of pressure to make wages go up. Mm-hmm. If a business comes in that's paying $15, $20 an hour, well, it puts a little bit more pressure on wages. If we had a shortage of laborers, there'd be pressure on wages, but we don't. We have a surplus of people to work in our community. And there isn't that upward pressure on wages that there needs to be to make them come up. It may very well be a recommendation from a task force that's looking into wages and poverty. There's no question that, a lot of people in our community make a sub-poverty level wage. And to me, I think that's kind of sinful. It's not very Christian, in a country like ours that we have people out there who make a less than a poverty level wage. And as Tracy says, boy, when you start adding in their child care, your $5.50 an hour, or whatever the minimum wage is, really is $1 an hour, because you're going to pay $3 or $4 for your child care. Mm-hmm. And you can't live on $1 an hour. You just can't do it. Mm-hmm. So we as a community ought to be looking at that. And it's a privilege, I think, for a business or a company to want to come here. It's not the other way around.
Well, that was the other point that this other candidate. It was Carolyn Overman, who's a business person herself, I think Western Montana Lighting, but she was saying she didn't see. Not that she was adamant about this, but she didn't see that there was any really great track record of that when you gave tax incentives or subsidies to companies, that in the long run it did much good for the community anyway. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. Look at Clausen's. Clausen's came to us and he said, boy, the wood window business has gone right out the window. We just lost White Pine and Sash, who made most of the wood product for our windows. Everyone's going to vinyl windows. We'd like some tax incentives so we can retool and go over to vinyl windows. We know it's a big gamble. It's a gamble for us. We've been in the community for over 40 years. And the council said, okay. Here's a business that's been here for a long time. They're sticking their necks out and try to keep a few people on and keep their business going. And if it works, it may grow and expand. And they'll have a whole new market that they can be competitive in. Big Sky Brewing was another one. Their company took off. And they couldn't make enough moose drool beer to keep up with demand. And they said, with some help on our taxes, we could afford to expand. You know, it's one of the biggest problems, you know, and unless you've ever run a business, you don't realize it. But you pay all this personal property tax, and you sit there and you go, well, what's the incentive for me to get new equipment if I'm just gonna get taxed to death on it? Where's that incentive to expand my business, to take on more employees, if they're gonna tax me for all the new equipment and for all those employees I've got? I mean, the incentive is gone if it isn't, you know, to do any of that, to upgrade, to make your business safer. In the case of Clausen's or someone else, you know, put in modern equipment so your employees aren't getting hurt. So, I mean, you know, we could have a good argument. Jim McGrath and I have great ones about tax incentives. I think to sell your community, to just give it away, to bring in the latest chain store, or, you know, to bring in Saturn to make cars, that's a losing battle. But when you've got a business in your town that's been here for a long time and worked hard, and they see an opportunity, you know, and you might have a chance to save some jobs or help them, and they're willing to stick their necks out, you know, it's like investing in the company, basically, to give them a hand. I think, you know, it's a fairly legitimate thing to do.
Tax incentives have their place, but I think, again, we should be on an equal playing field. If big business, you know, like the Walmarts and like the Eagle Hardware, wish to come in, that is still going to create opportunity. It is going to create high-paying jobs that people can hopefully climb up the ladder. And if someone, you know, is currently employed and they get a better offer from someone else, to me, that's how the whole market system works, is supply and demand and competition. And to me, it's worked pretty good so far. And so, to me, I think everybody should, you know, we should be on an even playing field. And we shouldn't necessarily be, you know, negative to big business. You know, I think they have a lot to bring, a lot of opportunity, a lot of money. The Eagle Hardware, you know, can create a lot of jobs, you know, not only in the initial stages of construction, and, you know, until the building's actually ready, but they're gonna need, you know, employees for one. They're also gonna need services. They're gonna need someone to plow those parking lots. They bring in a lot of extra stuff that builds local business also. You know, they're gonna need somebody to do their landscaping. They're gonna need someone to mow that grass and keep it. And those all create, you know, not just their jobs, but it brings in a lot of other opportunity for small businesses to you know, increase their business and, you know, their customer base there.
Yeah, there's no question that, you know, you have to grow as a community. I mean, if you're not growing as a community, you know, and you start to stagnate, people are going to be
Right,
unemployed.
then no one can stay.
Nobody's wages are
Right.
going to go anywhere.
No.
And, you know, and you mentioned Eagle Hardware, you know, and I think Eagle Hardware is a fine example. I mean, it's perfectly fine that Eagle Hardware comes to Missoula. But, you know, as a council person, and they come to Missoula, or as a county commissioner and they want to come to Missoula, you know, some of the first words out of their mouths are, what can you do for us? And, you know, I would rather say to them, what are you going to do for Missoula? Not what will Missoula do for you. And, you know, they'll want us to you know, put in infrastructure for them. They'll want us to maybe they want a stoplight out on, in their case of Eagle Hardware, they want the stoplight so they can have better access in and out of the site. You know, it maybe tells you something.
When you say
tells
they
you something
want,
about their
when
site.
you say they want it, you mean they want us to pay for it?
They want us to pay for it. Now, we've been pretty adamant that we won't pay for it. You know, if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. It's just the way it's going to have to be. And because, you know, you just can't go giving these things away.
Right, but also the taxes that they are going to, you know, ultimately pay for developing that land and putting their business in are going to go back into the community
Well,
also,
most
which
into
will
the
help.
school district.
Which, well, a lot of it will help though with, you know, infrastructure and other things like that. So, to me, it all kind of ties together. And so, you know, like Craig says, we can't stop growth. You know, I want to be able to have my son, if he chooses to stay here, like I said before, have the opportunity to stay here. So we have jobs and, you know, some place where he can, you know, start his family if he so chooses. We cannot be, you know, no growth at all. That's just not a reality.
This guy's been sitting in the
Spit
hot
it
seat
out.
at city council, so I mean, I'm not, but he may have more ready information. What was the price tag I saw on what it was costing to coordinate all the city traffic lights? On the last panel, I said 24 million, and
Oh,
somebody
no,
said no, it was
no,
way,
no,
way.
no, no. The figure at 6 in my head is like 1.2 million or something like that. But I think that includes putting in all the brand new steel structures you see them putting out there that's slowing traffic down. But it's a whole synchronization computerized, which will hopefully speed up the flow of
Is
the
that
traffic.
part of that huge federal pot of
That was
money?
part of the CMAQ money.
And
Yeah.
what was the grant? What was the? That was 30.
Roughly 30, 35 million. Yeah. We've put it
Keep the
to
traffic
really
going.
good use, you know, and
How much
and-
have we got left?
Oh, I don't know if I could tell you, but, you know, I know down at Public Works, there's an excellent map that shows all the projects where
Okay.
CMAQ has gone into, and you'd be
Can
amazed.
people can go down
Oh,
there
sure,
and look at
sure.
that.
Yeah,
That's the ivy-colored plate.
No, well, right down
Oh,
City
right
Hall,
right in
on the
City
second
Hall.
floor.
Okay. I'd rather go to that ivy-colored covered.
Well, that's
building.
a fun building. We had Max Bacchus in town and Rick Hill this spring to
Yeah.
talk to him because the whole transportation.
I'm taller than Rick Hill, by the way. I wanted everyone to know.
Well,
that.
Rick didn't come. He sent one of his minions to come, so I can't verify that you're taller than him. But it was quite interesting though to sit down with Max Bacchus, you know, who introduced the STARS 2000 transportation bill, and which is heavily weighted toward letting the state have authority over the money rather than getting more of it down to local levels, which is where we would like to see it. We'd like to be able to say how we'd like to see our transportation dollars spent, not have Helena dictate it to us or even Washington, D.C. But we got the map out and we said, here's what flexibility and local control over some money can do. And we started showing them where California Street Bridge, the north side access, the bike trails, the workout at Malfunction Junction, the different things we've done. And there's restrictions on how the money can be spent. You can't
Right.
increase capacity. I mean, you can't build a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes because that increases capacity. But, there's other things you can do with the money. You can put a sidewalk alongside the 2-lane street or a bike lane along there, or you can build a bridge with it, if it doesn't increase capacity. And he was like amazed at just what you can do with the money if you have some local control over it.
The Orange Street Bridge. That's the state's responsibility. The Orange Street Bridge, or the county, or the city, or everybody.
I think it's a state highway, but we maintain it under a contract.
Right. Now, when is that supposed to finally get
It'll
rebuilt?
start happening probably within another year. I would say next year sometime.
Okay.
It's moving right along.
Right. And so, all right. So within a year, 18 months, you're going to start seeing things happen over
We
there.
will, and
Well,
it'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be real interesting. There always will be one lane open,
yeah.
but
But I mean, no. But it's
expect delays,
that's going to be
right?
that's going to be a 4-lane bridge.
I don't think it's going to be 4 lane. I think it's 2 lanes with 2 bike lanes and sidewalks.
Really?
Maybe it's going to be 4.
I
could be-
wasn't saying that from knowledge. I
Well,
just
whatever is out
assumed
there,
that they were
we
gonna-
can't increase capacity. I think it'll just tie into what's there, and I
Right.
guess it is kind of 4 lanes there, isn't it? It's
Well, it's
when you come off
no,
from it
it's-
heading south, it's 4 lanes.
It widens out into 4 lanes,
Winds
right,
out
but the
into
bridge
4,
is
so
only-
it'll be
right.
basically the same. It won't bottleneck down anymore.
All right, I'll have to check up on
Yeah,
that.
it won't
I don't have
bottleneck.
a clear picture on that yet.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be 4 lanes in the sense that then everything.
2 lanes in each
that,
direction.
that everything would be 4 lane
Yeah,
up to
I
where
think
Stevens
you're right.
is 4
Right,
lanes.
lanes.
it'll
Right.
probably be like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was just wondering what. Do you ever hear any discussions or complaints about exiting the Madison Street Bridge on the university side? That where you
Yeah.
come down and you have to take the curve, and then you either go left or you go right. I mean, is that you ever hear?
Nobody ever
anybody?
talks to me.
I haven't heard any
I've
of
never
this.
heard any of the word
I
3
guess
people.
people are more.
Well, McCarthy, we don't have to worry.
I
The
drive
the
slow.
university's
I
buying that
drive-
entire block up, they're
Yeah.
gonna just tear down all the houses.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Oh,
I
yeah,
heard
they're buying
also.
it all up, so they can tear it all down, and that whole thing will get reconfigured.
What do they want to put up there?
God only knows. I think they wanted to put up a convention center field house, but, they're finding that they're like us, they're running out of money.
Well, I mean, I've always been surprised. I mean, the university is consistently, and I guess that's just going to be a law of nature for long before after I'm dead, that the university is Excuse me, how much time do we have left? Okay, we gotta wrap it up. I gotta stop sermonizing. Okay, I'll give you about 50 seconds to wrap it up and say why you want another shot at a term, and then we'll go over to Tracy.
Well, I just want to say it's been, anytime you have an opportunity to get involved in, what's going on in your government, it's a responsibility that I don't take lightly, but it's also an honor to, to serve your community and serve a good ward like Ward 6. I think in the last 4 years I've been real responsive to the people in Ward 6 whenever they've called with neighborhood problems. I've worked with them to resolve those problems. And also I've been, keyed into the larger community issues. I mean, we're not a small town anymore, and it used to be you could represent that little ward and deal with the barking dogs and the loud neighbors, but now, the issues are much more community-wide. And, in the next 4 years, there are many things I'd like to look at. Growth management, obviously, is one of the primary, one of our prime issues. Affordability and livability are the two key things. So, I mean, if we don't get a handle on growth, if we don't get a handle on, making our community a more sustainable community, economically as well as environmentally, there won't be any quality of life left to attract the businesses, to keep your child here and keep me here, because we'll just go on to the next community that hasn't been ruined yet. So I think it's real important that we get a handle on growth, that the special interests who want to derail the growth management process get put in their place, and realize that they're part of this community, and if they, if they're more interested in the quick buck than the quality of life here, then so be it. But that's what we're up against, and I'm all for trying to get a handle on growth and make our community affordable and livable.
Okay. And you want to give this guy a little break for a few years.
So I can go fishing.
And so you get the minute to wrap it up and tell us why.
I'm very concerned about our community. I have been involved in trying to, again, help people get some property tax relief. And I really just want to help the people. I think there are a lot of very important issues coming up. Growth management. I think affordable housing is very important. But one of my basic things is again, basic services. We need to make sure we have adequate police and fire protection and roads, because that's what the citizens of our community expect from city government. I'm very for making sure, especially our police department, has the tools that they need to keep our crime rates down, because that's very important. If we don't have safe streets, again, no one will want to live here. And again, clean air and clean water. That's a duty I think that any elected official has to their constituents, is to make sure that we have clean air and clean water. And I really want to help the people in not only Ward 6, but in Missoula also.
Great. Thanks very much for watching and listening to Public Conversation with Tracy Turek and Craig Sweet. Tuesday is primary day, and you'll have to make up your minds how to vote in this first nonpartisan electoral race in Missoula, Montana. And thanks to a great volunteer crew and all the staff help that makes Missoula Community Access Television such one of the finest facilities in the nation. So we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.